watching All 24 News World News Program, broadcasting to you live from the capital, Algiers. And up next are tonight's top stories. Renewed U.S. Zionist airstrikes on Iran leave casualties. Tehran hits a U.S.-UK base in response. Trump says victory is imminent and he's scaling back operations. Also coming up, Tehran says Natanz was targeted in a U.S. Zionist attack. Now the IAEA is investigating. Russia is condemning it, and Bushehr port is also reporting damage. Also in our news, a coalition of over 20 countries is rallying to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is talking transit fees and vowing to widen tensions in the Bab el-Mandeb and Red Sea. And later on, fresh Zionist strikes in southern Lebanon bring casualties. Hezbollah is expanding its fight, and Lebanon's health ministry confirms 5 hospitals are down in the south and Beirut suburbs. Welcome back. First off in our news tonight, the latest round of strikes has pushed the conflict into a more dangerous phase. The Zionist entity launched fresh airstrikes on Tehran and Beirut, while Iran responded with missile attacks beyond the occupied Palestinian territories. Yasin Eric reports.
Tensions are sharply escalating in the Middle East as another wave of overnight strikes pushes the conflict into a more dangerous phase. The Zionist entity hit Tehran again and also struck Hezbollah sites in Beirut, while reports from Iran pointed to civilian casualties in residential areas. Iran has also retaliated with missile fire that reached the joint UK-US base at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, but the missiles missed.
The Navy of IRGC pounded the facilities of the 2 El Minhad and Ali Salam air bases, the hangars and the fuel depots of the American Zionist aircraft with a massive volume of ballistic missiles and suicide drones.
Tehran says its response is part of True Promise 4. Iranian state media says the operation targeted U.S. bases in the region and sites inside occupied Palestine, including Ben Gurion Airport and Haifa. The legal backlash is widening too. Human rights experts have condemned the U.S. Zionist strikes on Iran and Lebanon as unlawful and warned they may amount to grave violations of international humanitarian law. Separately, a UN fact-finding mission has said a Zionist strike on Iran's Evin prison was a war crime.
The reported lack of effective advance warning by Israel, which may affect the population's ability to reach safety, raise serious concerns in relation to the principles of proportionality, distinction, and precaution under international humanitarian law.
The biggest knock-on effect so far is hitting energy markets. Reuters says attacks on energy infrastructure, along with the squeeze on the Strait of Hormuz, have pushed Brent above $110 and could keep LNG supply tight for years. Reuters also reports that damage to Qatar's gas facilities could take 3 to 5 years to repair, while Goldman Sachs is warning that oil prices will face upside risk into 2027. That shock is now forcing Washington to move on supply. Reuters said the Trump administration has broadened access to Venezuela's PDVSA and issued a temporary Jones Act waiver to help move fuel and fertilizer more easily inside the United States, as it looks for ways to ease pressure on prices and supply. In Tehran, the message is still defiance. Worshippers gathered for Eid prayers at the Imam Khomeini Grand Mosque, and later funeral gatherings were held for IRGC spokesman Ali Mohammed Naini, who was killed in the strikes.
This is a profound sorrow. Our leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is no longer with us, and we pray in his absence. We have nothing to say to our enemies. We turn to God. Our soldiers on the battlefield are conveying our message to the enemy. We pray to God to grant our nation a swift victory.
So beyond the battlefield, this has become a wider crisis touching law, energy, trade and global security. And with every new strike, the risk of a bigger regional spillover keeps rising.
In a related news story, the Wall Street Journal reports Iran fired 2 medium-range ballistic missiles towards Diego Garcia, the US-UK military base in the Indian Ocean. No damage was reported. The attack highlights Tehran's push to extend its reach beyond the Middle East and threaten US interests. Iran's military is now pointing the finger at the US and the Zionist occupation. A top commander says American and Zionist aircraft are targeting civilian ships in the Gulf. He warns that if it continues, there will be a severe response. US President Donald Trump says the US is close to hitting all its military goals in the Middle East and is weighing an end to its regional presence. On Truth Social, he outlined a plan to neutralize Iran's missile, naval, and air capabilities and block any nuclear ambitions.
But I'm not surprised. They executed 3 young people for protesting.
Destroying Iran's missile capabilities and all launch platforms completely, destroying Iran's defense industrial base, eliminate Iran's navy and air force, and prevent Iran from approaching nuclear capability.
Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, is reaffirming Russia's support for Iran, calling it a reliable partner. The Kremlin released a statement Saturday quoting the Russian president as saying Moscow will remain a loyal friend and trusted ally. The message came in 2 New Year's greetings to Supreme Leader Mujtaba Khamenei and President Masoud Pezeshkian for Nowruz, the Iranian holiday. Iran's Natanz uranium enrichment facility was hit, with Tehran blaming the United States and the Zionist entity. Officials say the strike caused no radioactive leaks and poses no danger to nearby residents, according to Tasnim news agency. The attack adds to mounting tensions over Iran's nuclear program, already a focus of international concern. For its part, the IAEA says it received notice that Iran's Natanz uranium enrichment site was attacked Saturday, blaming the United States and the Zionist entity. The UN nuclear watchdog reports no rise in radiation outside the facility and says it is investigating the strike and its wider implications. Russia condemns the attack on Iran's Natanz uranium enrichment facility. Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova says it is a blatant violation of international law and calls on the UN and the IAEA for an immediate, objective assessment. She warns that such attacks risk triggering a large-scale catastrophe across the Middle East. U.S. and Zionist attacks struck 2 naval piers in Bushehr, southern Iran, early Saturday. Reports say maritime facilities and a boat dock were damaged and several vessels destroyed. The port near the Bushehr nuclear power plant remains a flashpoint given its strategic location and risks of escalation across the region. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian says Tehran does not want conflict with its neighbors and calls on Islamic countries and what he calls brothers in the region to pursue unity. In a message on the occasion of Eid al-Fitr, he warned that the Zionist occupation is the only beneficiary of disputes among regional states.
To the Islamic countries and our dear neighbors, you are our brothers, and we have no intention of engaging in any conflict with you. The only beneficiary of our divisions is the Zionist entity, Israel. On the occasion of Eid al-Fitr, we ask God to grant us strength and unity to act in accordance with the teachings of the Prophet and to attain his approval.
Iran threatens Russian military strikes against the UAE. Tasnim reports that the Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters warns the UAE not to allow attacks on Abu Musa and Greater Tomb Islands, stressing any aggression from the Emirati territory will be met with a harsh Iranian response.
Iran has warned the United Arab Emirates that any future attacks from its territory on the islands of Abu Musa and Greater Tomb will provoke a powerful response. The Iranian armed forces have stated that they are prepared to deliver crushing strikes on the Ras Al Khaimah region in retaliation.
For its part, the UAE says its air defenses intercepted 3 ballistic missiles and 8 Iranian drones on Saturday, part of a total of 341 missiles, 15 cruise missiles, and 1,748 drones stopped since the start of the regional conflict. Saudi Arabia also intercepted 17 Iranian drones targeting oil facilities in the eastern province. Meanwhile, Iraqi security forces report an officer killed in a drone attack on the intelligence service headquarters in Baghdad. Authorities say outlaw groups carried out the strike and are pursuing those responsible. More than 20 countries, including Germany, Japan, Bahrain, and the UAE, say they are ready to help secure the strategic Strait of Hormuz after Iran's blockade paralyzed shipping. The joint statement condemns Iran's or Iranian attacks on commercial vessels and energy infrastructure and the de facto closure of the strait. U.S. President Donald Trump says control should be in the hands of the countries that use it, calling the task militarily straightforward once the Iranian threat is removed.
The Strait of Hormuz should be managed by the countries that use it, and the task will be militarily easy for those countries once the Iranian threat is eliminated.
The U.S. military says Iran's ability to threaten the Strait of Hormuz has been degraded following a strike on a facility storing cruise missiles and other weapons. U.S. Central Command Chief Brad Cooper says the attack destroyed the site, along with intelligence support and missile guidance systems used to track shipping.
Iran's decades-old threat to the free flow of commerce throughout the Strait of Hormuz. On day 22 of combat operations, U.S. forces continue to take bold action and remain on plan to eliminate Iran's ability to project meaningful power outside its borders. Just 2 days ago, the U.S. Army launched the longest field artillery strike in Army combat history using precision strike missiles. The strike took out Iranian military infrastructure, demonstrating the U.S. military's unmatched reach and lethality.
Tehran warns it could extend instability to other straits, including Bab el-Mandeb and the Red Sea. Tasnim reports that if the U.S. attacks Korg Island, Iran threatens an unprecedented response, with the possibility of the Yemeni Houthi group joining the confrontation. Iran's parliament is preparing to approve a bill that would impose fees for the safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz. State news agency IRNA quoted a lawmaker Saturday saying the bill is ready. Saeed Rahmatzadeh, a member of the Economic Committee, said charging for passage through the straits is common practice on major maritime routes around the world. He added the fees would boost Iran's revenue and help improve security and maritime services. Oil prices climbed more than 3% at the close of trading Friday, marking a fourth straight session of gains as supply disruptions from the Middle East persist. Brent crude futures for May delivery rose 3.3% to $112.19 a barrel, posting a weekly gain of nearly 9%. West Texas Intermediate crude futures for May also moved higher, reaching $98.32 a barrel. Washington wants to release stranded Iranian oil to bring down energy prices. Tehran says it's just a psychological move. Either way, oil markets are staying cautious. Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz is still disrupted and prices keep climbing. Salman has more.
At a time when doubts are growing over global energy supplies against the backdrop of disrupted navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, Washington is attempting to activate an alternative route through the gateway of Iranian oil in a bid to curb soaring prices and contain an inflationary wave whose repercussions are spreading across the global economy. Under pressure from these developments, the U.S. Department of the Treasury quickly moved to activate an exceptional authorization allowing the marketing of floating shipments of Iranian oil and its derivatives in a step aimed to absorbing the price shock and restoring balance between supply and demand in oil market that has become increasingly fragile.
By temporarily releasing the standard supplies at sea, the United States is injecting around 140 million barrels of Iranian oil into the arteries of the global economy. Our goal is to boost global supply and address the supply bottlenecks caused by Tehran.
However, Iran's Ministry of Oil stated that on-the-ground realities do not reflect any actual surplus, emphasizing that the U.S. proposal is more an attempt to influence market sentiment than a genuine shift in supply dynamics.
At present, Iran does not fundamentally have any floating crude oil or surplus available for supply to other international markets. The U.S. Treasury Secretary's statement is aimed solely at giving hope to buyers and psychologically influencing the market. These claims lack realism. Their purpose is to try to control global market volatility by spreading false hopes among buyers at a time when supplies are under real pressure.
Between Washington's stimulus maneuvers and Tehran's doubts, trading has settled into a state of heightened caution. Signals of de-escalation have failed to break the upward trajectory of prices, which continue to be driven by a high-risk premium due to threats facing energy security and supply chains. While decision-making circles in Washington strive to offer economic reassurances to calm oil markets, the Gulf waters tell a different story, one to dominate by paralysis in navigation through the Strait of Hormuz and where energy markets refuse to yield to diplomatic messaging.
Goldman Sachs warns oil could stay above $100 a barrel until 2027. The bank cites ongoing Strait of Hormuz disruptions and war-related damage to energy infrastructure, potentially pushing Brent crude past its 2008 record. Uncertainty over the Strait's reopening and global inventory pressures could keep markets under strain for years. One person is dead, 2 others wounded after a Zionist occupation airstrike in southern Lebanon. State media says Zionist forces hit a house in the town of Andoria along with neighborhoods in Beirut's southern suburbs. Lebanon's health ministry now puts the death toll from the renewed aggression that began March 2nd at more than 1,000, with nearly 2,800 wounded. The ministry expects those numbers to keep climbing as airstrikes continue. And still with Lebanon and with tensions from recent attacks continue to cast a long shadow, many families already forced from their homes are now facing a second crisis. Living in fragile tents, displaced communities are struggling to stay safe and dry as relentless rains turn their daily lives into a fight for survival. More with Karim Faz-Zakri now.
Steady rain pouring down, and all that standing between these families and the elements of flimsy tents that offer almost no protection. These makeshift shelters are barely holding up, and the nights, they are long, cold, and just exhausting, especially for people who have already lost everything.
We were all soaked, completely drenched inside the tent. There was water everywhere. Look, this is my son. He's soaking wet. Last night was a nightmare.
The water flooded the house all at once. My son got sick, everything was washed away, and we couldn't sleep at all.
And that's the reality inside these tents. Water seeps right through the fabric, turning the ground into mud. Every single drop is a brutal reminder of just how urgent the need for humanitarian aid has become. For the displaced, the vulnerability is total. There's no real protection from the cold, no dry space to escape to, and very few resources to make it through the night.
Last night was really tough, like every night here. Whenever it rains, the tents flood, the tarps get soaked, and it becomes extremely difficult. But last night was even worse. We had 2 storms last week, and this one has been going on for 10 days.
So as the rain keeps falling, each night turns into another test. Another struggle to endure, caught between the fear of bombs and the harsh and relenting reality of life out in the open.
The Lebanese Health Ministry says 5 hospitals in southern Beirut and southern Lebanon have been put out of service due to the Zionist attacks. 4 more hospitals were partially damaged, prompting urgent evacuations to protect patients and medical staff across Beirut, Mount Lebanon, and the south. Hezbollah says it's expanding its military operations against the Zionist occupation forces in southern Lebanon and stepping up shelling of settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. In a statement Saturday, the group said it carried out 55 military operations since the start of the war, including rocket and drone attacks and direct clashes with Zionist occupation forces in the south. In Gaza, Eid prayers bring a moment of hope. Worshippers gathered at the historic Qumrani Mosque, which, despite the Zionist airstrike damage, remains a key landmark. More on this story with Sofian Kinturi.
From the early hours of Friday morning, Palestinian worshippers gathered at the historic Qumrani Mosque in Gaza's old city to perform Eid prayers. Takbirs echoed through the ancient site as the faithful prayed inside the mosque, which bears the scars of war. Large sections remain heavily damaged, and its minaret has collapsed following Zionist bombardment during the war on Gaza. Despite the destruction, the rituals continued. After prayers, worshippers exchanged greetings, while some distributed sweets to children gathered inside, trying to bring moments of joy in the midst of hardship.
We hope the coming days will be better for the people of Gaza, who have endured very difficult times. We have suffered greatly, lost our homes and many of our loved ones because of the war. We wish for health and safety during this Eid. We hope our destroyed homes will be rebuilt, that people can return to their homes, and that peace will prevail.
At the old cemetery, families gathered at the graves of relatives killed in the war. For many, the joy of Eid feels incomplete without those they have lost. Sitting beside her son's grave, Omno speaks to him softly, recalling how she had prepared Eid sweets, his favorite.
There is no Eid, no joy. He was my eldest son. How can I be happy? He was engaged, he was about to get married. We were supposed to celebrate. Now, he will marry in paradise.
An atmosphere shaped by both sorrow and resilience. After nearly 3 years of war in Gaza, Palestinians continue to hold on to life, preserving their traditions and marking Eid, even as the wounds of loss remain open.
Moving on to another matter. President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, received a phone call on Saturday from Masad Ballas, senior advisor to U.S. President for Arab, Middle Eastern and African Affairs, who congratulated him and the Algerian people on the occasion of Eid al-Fitr, wishing Algeria continued prosperity and progress. During the call, they also discussed Algerian-American relations and reviewed current global developments. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel says his country is ready for potential U.S. aggression, activating a defensive People's War Plan. Speaking to foreign activists, he emphasized the unit of Cuba's revolutionary leadership and warned that Washington's pressure leaves only one option: full resistance. Let's catch up on more international news stories in the News in Brief.
Spanish police in Huelva, Andalusia seized 5 tons of cocaine from Morocco in a major anti-drug operation. 8 people were arrested and around €1 million, along with firemen and speedboats used in smuggling, were confiscated.
Hundreds of people took part in a demonstration in Paris on Saturday, calling for the independence of the New Caledonia. Protesters rejected the 2005 agreement between the French government and parties represented in New Caledonia's parliament, saying it entrenches colonial rule and reinforces France's control over the territory.
2 people were killed and a third injured in a Ukrainian drone strike on a house in Russia's Volgograd region, according to local authorities, amid rising cross-border attacks and damage to energy infrastructure. Separately, a Russian drone strike in Ukraine's Zaporizhia region destroyed a private home, killing a couple and injuring their 2 daughters. Kyiv also reported widespread power outages in Chernihiv following Russian attacks.
The International Gymnastics Federation announced the cancellation of the Artistic Gymnastics World Cup that was scheduled to take place in Qatar from April 5th to 8th. The decision comes due to the logistical challenges, particularly delays in delivery of equipment and apparatus required for the competition.
And that's all for tonight. Thank you for watching. See you next time.